Hello everyone, we are at the Albert Augustine Jr. Memorial Park, which has been renamed as Sunnyhills Albert Augustine Jr. Memorial Park in honor of Albert Augustine Jr., who did major work for the African Americans here in the community, which is the first neighborhood ever in the United States that was planned to be racially integrated. And we are here today with California State Assembly member from District 25, Alex Lee, and one of the honorees, Margaret Jackson. So welcome to YoIndiaTV. It's a beautiful occasion and we are commemorating all the achievements of the blacks or the African Americans here in USA. It's a Black History Month from Feb 1 to March 1, 2022. How's the feel?
Feels great. Milpitas has a lot of underwritten history and great chapters in the Black American history, and I'm really glad to be celebrating here in 2022. And of course, none other than celebrating Margaret Jackson for wonderful contributions to small businesses throughout the state, and especially the Bay Area, especially people of color-owned businesses.
Wonderful. So these kind of events are pretty encouraging. Blacks have really been enslaved since, I don't know, 1600 something, long back, and 13th Amendment came, but we still see some atrocities going on, and as a result in 2020 recently we had the Black Lives Matters movement. So what is your take on the present day scenario about how the treatment to the blacks or the non-discrimination policy is being enforced?
Well, America's one of the original sins is slavery. The first one, of course, is being indigenous genocide. And of course, in this country, we have a lot of historic wrongs we're making up for, and even though the civil rights movement made enormous strides more than half a century ago now, we still have so much progress to catch up to. And racism is definitely not over in this country. Right now, still, there's much discrimination in housing, employment, and of course, huge disparities in our criminal justice system. There's lots to be ashamed about, but a lot of progress that we can still make, and I think we're moving into a more multicultural, more accepting phase in our society, but we're also at the crossroads to make sure that progress must be enshrined and protected.
So you've been working a lot on the social housing, equitable housing which is owned by the government or any non-profit and people can afford it. It's more about affordability, renting out something in Silicon Valley, which is one of the most expensive places in the entire USA, Other than Manhattan, this is like kind of on the peak. So tell us a little more about the specifics of this, what non-profits are you working with, or what are the specific communities you have brought to social housing?
Yeah, well, I think even in the Bay Area, we give Manhattan a good run for its money now. San Jose is the second least affordable place to live in the entire country now. I forgot who's number one now. Maybe it's San Francisco, maybe it's Manhattan. But the fact of the reality remains that many folks who have built this community now, who've lived here for all their lives, are being priced out because housing is being over-commodified and people are being priced out. So that's why I introduced AB 2053, the Social Housing Act, which is the public provision of housing for all income levels. Now, we can learn from successful models in Asia and in Europe that they have providing housing as a municipal right. Just like we provide schools for everyone, no matter your income level, roads for everyone, no matter your income level, we can do that for housing. In this country, we unfortunately have created two categorizations of housing, right? One for the luxury, for the wealthy, and one for the very, very poor. That solution doesn't work. That's why we have the universality. So working with housing advocates, labor unions, and neighborhood groups to make sure we can have our say and control about building housing for all. Because the real historic wrong, and this relates to Black history as well, is that while perhaps there's good intention about housing the most destitute in our society, they became concentrations of poverty, just more factories of segregation. But if we look at other models in other developed countries and say that everyone, regardless of race, regardless of income level, can live in the same neighborhoods and prosper together, that's how we go forward, and that's why we need social housing.
So you being the youngest assembly member ever that California has seen, you're also an Asian American, and being under 30, I think you're almost 27 if I'm right, 26. See, I mean, it's really a matter of pride for one and all to see youngsters coming up, and we are very excited. But everyone talks about experience. When you talk about the age, it's mostly about I worked so many years there, I have so much experience this, there is a length and breadth and depth of experiences that people have with the age. So how did you overcome that barrier and rose up? You actually thrived in USA, and you are from from an immigrant family as well. So tell us a little more about your success story.
Absolutely. I would not be here today not for my community. We're staying today in a park named after a African American leader in a time when it was predominantly white city. Milpitas today, we almost take it for granted in the Bay Area, is predominantly Asian American now, but it was very, very different 50, 60 years ago. So if it were not for those leaders decades ago who made it more accepting and more possible for immigrants to come here, I mean, also the big story about the civil rights movement got rid of very racist immigration quotas that allowed families like mine to immigrate here, right? It's a whole class solidarity and racial solidarity movement, liberation movement. But I have 26 years of lived experience in this community, so that I think that qualifies me to represent this community. And just like young people today, we have so many things happening to our lives. We face rising cost of living pressures, climate change, racial injustice. All these things are in front of us, very much mirroring almost the 1960s when the civil rights era had monumental success. And I think this is a time and age at a crossroads where we need people who are forward-thinking and embrace the future. I always tell people, I have most to lose. I have to live through all the issues if we don't fix them today. So I think our community understands that, and people, whether they're young or old, understand we need a new approach to government and democracy.
So Tesla has been one of the largest manufacturing sectors in USA. USA is proud to be building cars and SpaceX. That's really remarkable. Conquering the Mars, if it is done by US and some immigrant, again Elon Musk is an immigrant, but there were plans to move out of Fremont. There were places which had better taxes, other states. And number two, Elon Musk has been greatly criticized, I'm sorry to say, but particularly from Democrats, we hear a lot that he hasn't been supporting the politicians. Now, you had a law that corporations should not be giving out donations to the politicians.
Yeah.
So how do you correlate this scenario in terms of Elon Musk? Give us some details and insights. What do you feel about it?
Well, I'm always very proud that Tesla is inside my assembly district. In fact, I'm the only assembly district that has any car manufacturing in the entire state. But the fact of the matter is that Tesla has benefited enormously by decades of public policy and investment towards electric vehicles. His company would not be possible without our investment, our public commitment towards EVs. So he has really richly benefited from that. And of course, there are many eccentric billionaires out there that will make a lot of noise, but the fact of the reality is their headquarters and their manufacturing is still here in Fremont. Their headquarters, they may move to Austin or move to Texas where they have more freedom and the politicians are more readily entertain his whims. But the fact of the reality is this is where the market is, this is where the desire for clean EV technology and all that stuff is, and we will continue to support that, no matter what the whims of the CEO may be.
Wonderful. So what about the law that you introduced that keeps away politicians from making, keeps away corporations from making donations in the political arena?
Yeah, so on my first day in office in 2020, I introduced Assembly Bill 20, which bans politicians in California from taking money directly from corporations. Now, if someone to run for Congress or president, that's already the law. They can't take money directly from corporations, but in California that's the case. We need to be moving more and more to democracy that's based on people, and not just corporate entities or other special interests. And the people agree, I think, even my district. That's why we need to make sure we have stronger campaign finance reform measures and making sure we're lining up to the wills of the people.
So last but not the least, I would like to touch upon the point that when someone talks about socialism, like we have social democrats, and they are appreciated a lot to make situation more equitable for everyone. But at the same time, when we talk strongly about socialism, there is a thin line and it somehow merges into communism. How do you make sure that the two are not mixed and you stick to the, fairer thing rather than getting into the extreme communism?
Well, my family are proudly from Hong Kong, and their roots are, while recent from Hong Kong, they chose to move there from the mainland of China because they escaped the People's Republic of China. So I clearly know what is communism and what is not communism.
Yes.
There's a lot of hyperbole out there, what is communism, what is socialism, but the fact of the reality is developed countries like in India and Asia and Europe have embraced a government intervention that allows people to prosper, like universal health care, universal education, or universal child care. Those are things that America has lagged behind, and if we fear progress and call them labels that they're not, then we weren't going to achieve that way. So I understand what real communism is and what catching up to modern society is.
So since we are talking on the beautiful occasion of observance of the Black History Month in Milpitas and Silicon Valley, what's your message to the viewers for all the people, not just for African Americans?
What I definitely would say is Black liberation is liberation for all races, as evidenced by the 1960s Civil Rights Movement, when people across the United States and even the world fought to end segregation, fought to end explicit racism and discrimination. That opened the doors for people who look like you and I to come to America, to immigrate and prosper here, because once we fight together, because all these issues of discrimination affect all of us, and if we are together in this fight, we can make a society that is equal, that is fair, and that is not discriminatory for all people, no matter their color, no matter their race, no matter their creed, and that's the beauty of it, right? We owe a lot to the titans of Black history, Dr. King, but we also owe a lot to the local change makers who don't often get written in history books, but we should be talking about them a lot more.
So from Assembly Member Alex Lee, what is the next move? What is the next bill you are going to introduce? What's your focus area?
I suppose my big focus this year is on social housing, to making sure we have housing for all. I believe housing is a human right, and that's how we're going to achieve it, through social housing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.